Greetings and welcome to the channel. Today is a story day, and today's story is an old English folk tale about a man and two mermaids. And on the channel we have told quite a few merfolk stories a long time ago, in the times of the Anglo-Saxons and later on the Vikings and the Anglo-Normans. There lived a man, and he lived in a farmstead, a small farmstead on the edge of the coast. Some say he lived in Lincolnshire, whilst others claim the story comes from Yorkshire. As to the origin, it is irrelevant. The story is the key and the most important thing. Now our man, he was a farmer and a fisherman. He was very well known for having the ability to catch lots of fish. And he was also well known in the area he lived in for having a very good farm. He was a great farmer. He had cows, not like the black and white cows that we see today. More like the Highland cows we see in Scotland with brown fur. And he had lots of sheep and goats. Now one day it was a stormy day, and he was a bit bored in his longhouse, and he thought, well, it's going to be sunset soon and I'll go for a walk. He put on his favourite cloak and to have a walk along the sea edge, along the cliff, to a beach, because he often used to go beach combing, because you never know what may turn up on the beach. On a rare occasion he found barrels of mead, no doubt barrels that have, well, been, cast into the sea when a longship is wrecked. And that has been happening for a long time throughout history. And England and Great Britain, or Britannia, is well known for having lots and lots of shipwrecks. Now on this occasion, as I said, it was a stormy night. It's not long gone past sunset, and he was stretching his legs. He's had a hard day's work. He was also very well known for being a smithy, a blacksmith. He was superb at making things, from Dane axes to sea axes. And he was walking along the cliff, and he looked down where the beach he was going to have a walk, and he saw something in the sea. He rubbed his eyes and he thought, what's that? And he saw these two creatures having a fight. At first he thought it was two men fighting in the sea, but he said, well, that can't be true, because who in Hoheim would fight in the sea? And he rubbed his eyes again and looked a bit closer down. He was still very confused by what he saw, so he thought, I'll walk down the old coastline, an old path, to get a closer look. And he did this. And he came halfway between where he was and the beach, and he looked again. And these two creatures were fighting each other. He couldn't believe it. He couldn't believe what his eyes were seeing, for it was indeed. And can you guess what he saw? Well, I think you know from the title of the video and my description earlier that this man, this warrior, this Viking saw two mermaids fighting. A very unusual sight indeed. He rubbed his eyes in disbelief, thinking that this is the first time he's ever seen merfolk, and the first time he's ever seen a mermaid, or even two mermaids, in his life. And one of the mermaids had a shield and a spear, and the other one had a small knife. And the one with the spear, the one with the knife, was winning the fight. Well, he continued to walk down the path, and he got to the point where he reached the beach, and the two mermaids were startled to see him there, standing. He was actually in shock. He couldn't really move much. He was in disbelief, and I think you and I would also be in that situation at seeing a fight between two mermaids in the sea. And as I said earlier, the one with the shield and the one with the spear was winning the fight, and the other mermaid had taken some damage. She was bleeding from her arms and her chest, for it was bare, and she had quite enormous breasts. And so he continued to walk. He kind of shook himself out of the shock, thinking he's got to do something here, but he didn't know what to do. The only thing he had on him was a sea axe. He did not take a shield out on his walk or an axe, so he couldn't exactly join the fight. And he was still some distance away because it was a very wide and long beach, and the sea was out, and there was lots of sand in between him and the sea with the tide. And the mermaid who was losing the fight, the one with only a knife, like this, possibly, came onto the land. She was swimming onto the land and trying to get away, but the other mermaid, the one with the shield and the one with the spear, would not follow. And he looked up in the sky and he realised it was a full moon. He remembered this and thought it was very important. And so he kind of ran down screaming and got his sea axe out, shouting some Viking swear words at the other mermaid, because he knew he had to do something. I don't know, what would you do? Leave it in a comment, and don't forget to subscribe as well if you're not subscribed. And so he came to the mermaid that was injured, and by this time she's passed out. She'd taken a few blows to the head with a whack from the side, from the spear. And the other mermaid had swum off, thinking that this other mermaid was going to die. Well, the man, the Viking, he knew only one thing what he could do. He took his cloak off and he covered the mermaid with a cloak. She was half human from here and half a fish. And he picked her up. He didn't know whether to throw her back in the ocean or take her back home to his longhouse. So he decided to do this. He picked her up in his arms and wrapped her up, first of all, in his cloak. And a few minutes passed when he was walking up the beach, and suddenly the tail of the fish turned into legs. He was astonished by this. He'd never seen nothing like it. He thought, well, it's, I've heard about shape changes, but I've never seen a mermaid like this before, and this was the first set of mermaids he's ever seen. He's heard many stories around the fireside about merfolk, and he never really believed that they existed until now. And so he walked back to his longhouse. His fire was roaring, and it was warm in his longhouse. And he put the mermaid to bed. He gave her some water. She was still unconscious. He didn't know what to do. He thought, I'll wait till morning and see whether she survives or not. He was thinking that the mermaid would die and he'll have to dig a hole and bury her. I'm not telling anybody. But the morning came about. He did not go to bed that night, concerned about this mermaid. She was covered up on a straw bed in a wooden framed bed with loads of furs, so she kept warm, and he kept on putting wood on the fire to keep the longhouse warm. And in the morning came, she was still alive, but still she was in a deep sleep. And this stayed like this for a few days, 3 days in fact, passed, until she woke up. And when she woke up, she was startled and astonished to be in a building, for she has never been or stepped into a building before. In fact, this was the first time she had walked on land. She looked down to see that her fishy tail has gone, and she got two long legs. She could speak Viking for some reason, and they chatted and introduced each other. They, of course, remain nameless in this story, which is often the case with folk tales. And they got to know each other over a few days. And it turned out that this other mermaid she was fighting was her arch enemy, and had been hunting her for a long time. And she said at some point she's got to go back in the sea. and fight this mermaid. She said she'll come back on the full moon again to search for me along the coast to see and find my body. And if she does not, because merfolk have a lot of awareness and are very clever like this, she'll come back again. So she begged the man, he said, you must make me on the full moon, the next full moon. In 30 days you must make me a spear, and you must make me a new knife. For she lost her knife, her sea axe, in the fight. Even though the next day this lone farmer, this lone Viking, went to have a look, but he could not find it. It has gone, disappeared into the waves of the sea. And so the very next full moon came, and by this they got to know each other quite well, and they both fell in love with each other. And he agreed to do and did what he said he would do. On a moonlit night, when the moon was at its fullest, he made a spear on the forge, and he hafted it onto a shaft, and he made a new sea axe with a bone handle. And then they waited for another 30 days, another 4 weeks came and went. And then on the next full moon, the mermaid went down to the sea, and she jumped off a cliff into the sea, and suddenly, when she was in the sea, her fishy tail appeared again, and the evil mermaid appeared, and they both started fighting. Well, our Viking warrior was looking on this. He could not help the fight, he had to stay out of it. He was following instructions. And they both of the mermaids fought each other, this time as equals, for they both had a shield, and they both had a spear, and they both had a knife. And the mermaid that the farmer took on land won the fight. The other mermaid ran away, too scared to fight her. She'd lost the duel and was wounded badly and was never seen again. And the mermaid decided that she was going to spend the rest of her life living on the land and marry this Viking. And so both the farmer, the Viking, the warrior, and the mermaid had a very long and happy life. In fact, some people say that they had children, and some of those children were merfolk and went back to the sea, whilst others lived on the land, and their generations have passed since and are still around today, so they say. And I hope that you liked this little tale of the farmer and the two mermaids. But what would you do if you had found two mermaids fighting? Would you help? Would you join in the fight with your Dane axe and your sea axe? Or would you watch in disbelief? I think many would do the latter. And so for now, please like the video and also share it with your friends. Goodbye from Bragi. Goodbye from me. Merfolk, aren't they amazing?